Hey guys, what's up? Week 438. Let's just jump right into the reviews. And the first one up is from 1972, and this is Raw Meat, aka Deathline, 1972. Like I said, directed by Gary Sherman in his directorial debut. Now, this is kind of an odd kind of production history, as Gary Sherman was an American that kind of moved to the UK in the late 60s, early 70s, and he ended up making a movie there, which is kind of cool. But yeah, so Deathline, Raw Meat is a fantastic directorial debut. Gary Sherman would go on to direct one of my personal favorites in Dead and Buried, fantastic movie. Also released by Blue Underground on 4K. Recommend you pick that up. He would also do Poltergeist 3, Wanted Dead or Alive, Vice Squad, Mysterious 2, and I feel like, am I forgetting one of his other heavy hitters? Possibly off the top of my head. But Gary Sherman made some pretty good films. And you know what? As popular as the movies he did are, I feel like he should have directed more. And like his early story, he kind of talks. He did a lot of commercials and stuff, but they talk into special features how, you know, he was working with Jonathan Demme and Michael Mann at first, so it's like, and you hear those names, you know, and they went on to do a lot of big things as well. Jonathan Demme has since passed away, of course, but yeah, so 72 is kind of an odd year for British horror films. You know, Hammer is still, I wouldn't say going strong, but they're still going. You know, they had the 50s and 60s who were pretty strong there with a lot of great, amazing actors, very popular kind of actors in the horror world, like Peter Cushing, Donald Pleasence. I almost said Vincent Price. Of course, he's American, but, you know, Christopher Lee. Those kind of big three kind of actors like that. Donald Pleasence wasn't necessarily known for horror, but he would later become synonymous with horror later on in his career. But this is an early kind of, I wouldn't say early, I know he probably did horror films in the 60s like Flesh and the Fiends, but earlier horror film for Donald Pleasence. And this also has Christopher Lee in a small role. And those are kind of the big actors here for us horror fans, or, you know what I mean, along those lines. But yeah, the plot follows a couple, one American, one British, and they're going through the subway station, and they kind of stumble across a drunk guy, is what the male thinks. We know this guy is kind of, upper class, kind of involved with kind of the upper, you know, echelon people of society. But he's kind of out looking for, you know, he's looking to get laid, and he's kind of a little bit pervy, kind of a little degenerate kind of character. And what happens is they leave him there, and they read his name tag thinking he may be diabetic or something along those lines. They report it. His body disappears when the cops come back. And Donald Pleasence put on the case. They realize this guy's from the OBE, and he is someone important. So that kind of puts all, you know, everybody hyper-focused on his missing, you know, him being a missing person. But besides that, you know, people have probably been disappearing from here all the time, if you kind of catch my drift. What's going on with Raw Meat or Deathline is that there is somebody from a previous cave-in that they mentioned, kind of in just exposition kind of storyline, that there used to have people working on the stations underground and everything like that, entire families, and there's a cave-in, and there were kind of cheap, like, Scottish labor import, so they just let them kind of stay down there. And they thought that possibly somebody could have survived for a little longer, but it turns out that there's been civilizations living under the ground forever, and we are kind of down to the last man, who is very physically ill and he's not very communicative. All he can say is mind the doors. This is what he hears when the subway kind of guy says mind the doors. So like, we have a really good kind of almost Universal Monster kind of performance by this guy. You know, sympathetic yet terrifying and gross, all in the kind of same deal here. But you know, Raw Meat has kind of one of two films. We have that kind of actually kind of fairly grotesque, especially for 72, with some gore film. And then we have this kind of comedy piece that Donald Pleasence is playing. If you listen to the commentary by Gary Sherman, or the other commentary on here, Troy Howarth, Nathaniel Thompson, great commentary, they kind of talk about Donald Pleasence wanting to do a comedy. So when he read the script, he said, this is more of a comedy, I will do this. And he was kind of excited to do it. And that's kind of what brought in Christopher Lee, because they never shared the screen together, and they only share this one little small scene. They were movies together, but they never shared the screen together, which is odd, because I feel like Donald Pleasence and Vincent Price only shared that one scene too. And I always think about that, like how many times these actors worked alongside. We have, of course, The House of Long Shadows with, you know, 4 of them working together, and Screaming again with 3 of them working together, kind of classic actors, including John Carradine in that. But then when we talk about it later, like Journey Among Fear is the only time I think Vincent Price and Donald Pleasence actually shared screen time, and it's such a brief little moment. I feel like they added that in there just so they could interact interact with each other. And this is the kind of moment here with like a much better moment here with Christopher Lee as kind of a M15 kind of like guy who's from the government, and he's trying to cover it up and take over the thing and kind of brush everything under the rug that shouldn't be. But their interaction, Donald Pleasence and him, is great. This working class kind of alcoholic cop versus this upper, stiff upper lip kind of guy. And Christopher Lee plays that role great. He's got a fantastic mustache in here. But he filmed that scene interestingly too. But the one thing that Gary Sherman does really well is, he does a solid little story. It's got some mystery elements to it. It never goes quite over the top. It's pretty controlled in the aspect. Nothing really seems out of place, although it's a movie of two films, the comedy and the series. It does mesh pretty well. He also has a really long tracking shot that's like 7 minutes long, and I know he tried to kind of do a really long tracking shot in Dead and Buried, and I know that not all of that remained intact, or it was cut. I remember there was some footage of it, but he tends to really try to do these long, amazing tracking shots, and in Deathline, he got what he wanted, and that scene is brilliant, kind of going over all the bodies and underground, the caverns and stuff, seeing where this person lives, and it's a great kind of show, not tell kind of part of the story where you know everything about these people and this person that's still alive. I love just the one shots like that in horror films, how long they can shoot before they cut. It's like, it's hard, but at the same time, it also keeps you interested. And there's a certain part of me that always says, there's just still one shot, similar to the opening of Return of the Living Dead. That one shot lasts a very long time with James Karen and Tom Matthews walking through, and he's teaching him all this stuff. I thought it was a brilliant scene. And this one is just this nice little quiet, disturbing kind of tracking shot going over the mayhem and everything like that. Overall, Deathline is a good film. And it grew on me. The first time I saw this would have been the DVD from MGM that was put out in, I can't remember exactly, but that's the first time I saw it, and I was kind of underwhelmed. I was like, that was okay. The horror films I was used to were probably a little bit more extreme, and this was probably like, this is nasty and gratuitous, or like the Universal horror or something like that. And this was not quite either of them, but not necessarily bad either. And then when it's released on Blu-ray, I remember liking it a little bit more, but finally around this 4K, it kind of won me over to be a full fan. And I've grown, the older I get, the more and more I enjoy people like Christopher Lee and Donald Pleasence, as you should. I've always liked them, but the more I see them, it's a more I enjoy them. I can't remember the actor who is in a bunch of stuff, but I'm not super familiar with him. He's in a lot of TV from Britain. He's Donald Pleasence's partner, and he's very funny and good as well. They go back and forth really well. But Pleasence is fantastic. Lee's fantastic. The cannibal in here is also really good. The gore effects are very solid too, and there's some gratuitous stuff in here for 1972 that kind of pushes the envelope. When it was released in America, it was released under the title Raw Meat from AIP, and it was cut to ribbons. And I remember always hearing that, and I never saw that version. I don't even know if that version's available at all anymore, or really was widely available. It looks really good in 4K. The sound is decent too. It's got the Dolby Atmos, which Blue Underground always does a fantastic job with. But as far as the special features, we have the archival commentary with co-writer, director Gary Sherman, producer Paul Maslansky, and assistant director Louis Morrow Farrell. They talk about the cast, including David Ladd, who was in there because the producer's brother and stuff like that. New audio commentary with Nathaniel Thompson and Troy Howarth. That is good as well. Always enjoy hearing these guys talk about Donald Pleasence and Christopher Lee. I think Christopher Lee is that probably Troy? I think he said it was his favorite actor, so that's cool. Trailers, TV spots, radio spots. And then we have Tales from the Tube interview with co-director Gary Sherman, executive producers Jay Cantor and Alan Ladd Jr. From the Depths interview with David Ladd and producer Paul Maslansky. Behind the Doors interview with star Hugh Armstrong, who's passed away. A newly expanded poster and still gallery. So yeah, nice release from Blue Underground of kind of an underrated film. I like that they're doing good work for Gary Sherman. We of course got Dead and Buried already, and I can't recommend that enough. I think this one's pretty good too. And can you imagine being a first-time film director and you got Donald Pleasence and Christopher Lee? That would be very hard to do. And Gary Sherman had a lot of nice things to say about Donald Pleasence. That he was gung-ho, good to go, very polite, and he's like, "You're the boss. Let's go." And you like hearing those kind of good stories. Any stories about those classic actors is always intriguing. But great release from Blue Underground. Okay, here we go. Pretty infamous title here, released from MVD. And this is Where the Dead Go to Die, made in 2010, 2011, if I'm not mistaken, 2012, by Jimmy ScreamerClauz. And I remember watching this sucker right when it came out, the MVD on Earth Blu-ray. And it was a DVD or Blu-ray, whichever one. I remember getting it and watching it and kind of being completely shocked and blown away by it. And I don't know if I've rewatched it since, but I definitely did not forget it. Now, Jimmy ScreamerClauz is an animator, director. He makes music as well. He's pretty talented in what he does. And this movie caused a big stir because there's a lot of disturbing subject matter, but it's got this animated quality about it. It's like very darkly humorous at the same time, but incredibly unsettling. I don't really know how to explain Jimmy ScreamerClauz's work except that it may not be the most top-notch animation just during this time. Of course, he's used better animation as he got bigger products. He's making these things on this like low, like not a state-of-the-art computer and stuff like that, but he makes these wild, elaborate animated films with incredibly deep mythology, and they also have somewhat of a parody quality to them because he's kind of almost making fun of the I guess culture of America in general with how we do things and all that kind of stuff like that. And I kind of understood him a little bit more listening to the commentaries and supplemental features. But so Where the Dead Go to Die was an anthology. Originally it was a short in Tainted Milk that he made, and he made a sequel to that, or somewhat a related one, called Liquid Dreams, and he shopped it around, and he couldn't really do anything with it until Stephen Biro from Unearthed Film said, make a third one, we'll put it out, and don't call it an anthology, although it is an anthology. And they kind of made this movie, these stories all intertwined, and it really kind of follows like children in these kind of really horrible hellscape worlds. And I guess the character that kind of puts them all together is this dog named Labby, or I think it's Labby. And he's like this demonic presence that kind of convinces these young children to do awful things, and even has intercourse with one of them. And that was kind of one of the scenes that really kind of pushes you over the limits, where you say this movie only could be animated. You could never actually make this a feature film in that kind of world, like a live action. But the stories are actually, here's what it is. I saw some animated movies that I thought the animation held it back, like Dead Fury and stuff. I never was a huge fan of that movie. But I think more so it was kind of just the story didn't intrigue me. Maybe it moved a little too slow. While Where the Dead Go to Die has an uncanny kind of feeling to it, and it's the animation, but the story is intriguing enough and just dark enough, and it's kind of got that twisted quality where you can't believe they're actually doing it. But I think the three stories do come together kind of brilliantly. The first one follows the young boy who's kind of convinced to kill his parents in a really graphic, kind of nasty way. The second story follows a man who is kind of using these like liquid from an eyeball to kind of go back through the timeline and time travel and eliminate all his memories of death so he can live life to the fullest, or some weird shit like that. It kind of reminds me of the Kareem Hussein short from Theater Bazaar and that kind of little aspect as well. And the final story kind of has this underground kind of porn, child pornography thing. So the subject matters are really fucked up. And like listening to the commentaries, there's an old commentary on there, and Jimmy ScreamerClauz talks about like kind of making it more funny. And when it was put together, people were just like, "What the fuck is this, man? This is crazy." And there's a new commentary on there, or newer at least, and I can understand where he's coming from in there. He just seems not like jaded or anything like that, but just more of a realist in that subject, coming from that like independent film world and going through all this stuff and putting these hard work and interacting with a lot of people and things like that. And then he comes across these like, I just do this for myself and I have a job and whatnot. I don't want a job animating. It's an artist. He wants to create art, but he wants to not be held to any standards of his own. And I can really appreciate that, and I understand that to a certain extent too. But Where the Dead Go to Die is kind of this dark, weird, kind of a masterpiece for what it is. I know a lot of people do not care for the animation, but I'm not a guy who studies animation, especially like the kind of digital kind of style animation that much. I am going by it. It can be jarring and a little jittery at times, or off-putting in terms of low quality, but it also fits with kind of the story he's telling, and I think it works. I think Where the Dead Go to Die is a solid, creepy, crazy, disturbing movie, and I think that it lived in infamy, obviously, because people from the kind of animation world got a hold of it, and they tore it a new asshole and complained. But it's kind of like when somebody gets, I remember my first beer. Like, people are not used to this kind of stuff, seeing it, and a lot of the people that are going to see it on Earth Film are going to be pretty used to this kind of stuff, unless you bought Rock and Rule and then you buy something else like from their catalog and you're like, what the fuck? But there's a lot of features on here, which is appreciated. We got the commentary, 2 of them. Then we got deleted scenes, quality violent cinema interview. That's about an hour and 15 minutes. Good podcast and good questions and good guys as well. Behind the scenes featurettes. Damana Hagen versus Scuzzies. And then we have some short films on here. The Scuzzies with commentary, which is one of the craziest damn things ever. Kind of like soap scum, living in a world of, you know what I mean? Like he like obviously seems to kind of have a weird disdain for humanity, which I can understand too. Like just disgusting human being watching, you know, this deformed Teletubbies thing. Like he takes like the kind of 50s kind of style trope or the 90s sitcoms that you grew up with and said, well, this is, even he jokes about this in the commentaries, and you can kind of understand where he's coming from in this aspect. Like, well, this episode here where, you know, like you have those weird like episodes where, you know, so and so ended up like running into like a kidnapper and got away, and it's a little dark, but he like makes fun of that, like, and that odd like saying, well, remember when he got his head chopped off and they shot up the school? So it's like his idea is just almost like this push forth this almost completely dark look at American culture, and just instead of like hiding it or touching it lightly, he just fully embraces it to the point of parody. But there's some really disgusting shit in the Scuzzies, but it's almost a little creature movie in the way that Jimmy ScreamerClauz would do. Very good. Labby vs. Mr. Pickles, epic rap battle. That is the classic epic rap battle YouTube thing, which I can't believe there's one of these. Clinical sodomy, affection, mutwa, reality, and those I think are music videos. The music is not my kind of thing. I don't hate it, but the animation's pretty cool and crazy stuff. And then we have Reality Bleed Through Remix, which I think is actually one of his first shorts. So there's a bunch on here. Recommended if you're willing to take a chance on some weird, creepy shit. And be warned, you know, the subject matter will bother some people, but like he says, he never went out to make like the edgelord movie exactly, you know what I mean? He didn't try to make the most fucked up thing he was thinking of. He was just trying to make something that he found funny, which shows that he has a very dark, warped sense of humor, which I can appreciate. Okay, the next one here is When Blackbirds Fly, and this is Jimmy ScreamerClauz feature follow-up, and this is made in 2015, and this has some familiar voices, like the last film. The last one had like Ruby LaRocca and Victor Bonacore, and I forgot to mention that Trent Hegg is in there. This one actually has, you know, J.D. Brown, who is in a lot of the independent movies around this time, like Hunters and other things like that. I think Ruby LaRocca is also in this one, and I think Victor Bonacore too, and it has Adam Brooks has a small role, so lots of cool stuff here. So When Blackbirds Fly, I think this is a better put together overall film. It's one singular story here. The animation's bigger. The story is more kind of you know, straightforward, I guess, if you can't say that. So in the commentary here, you kind of get the idea. He mentions that, you know, how we kind of wanted to, like, I keep saying satire and parody, but I feel like it is to a certain extent. He said he watched a lot of like religious stories, but he watched like the kind of scare tactic ones, like don't smoke weed, kind of the religious storyline, stuff like that. Like of all these different kind of religious stories, and he kind of put them in a blender and made his own warped reality of them. So what we have here is this couple who are wanting a child. In their world, they cannot have sex. They do not have sex. They do not see each other naked, but they kind of go and they put their name in a drawing or something to have a child to kind of adopt. They go to this weird kind of place after they're picked, and they pick this worm out. They pick this one who's very sick, as the father has this kind of idea where he kind of tries to help sick animals and bring them back to life and whatnot. So he is kind of like a bleeding heart type kind of guy when it comes to animals. So they pick this kind of dying worm and they put their DNA on it, and this young boy is kind of born from that. And this young boy is thrown into this world of complete confusion where they all worship this goddamn Cain. And he's everywhere. He's obviously a narcissistic kind of god where his posters are everywhere, and he says, if you don't love me, all this kind of stuff like that. Everything that somebody who is an omnipotent, powerful god wouldn't do if they actually were an omnipotent, powerful god, or anybody who is super powerful wouldn't constantly tell you, you should appreciate me, you should love me, everything like that. It's just like, I demand you to love me. That kind of stuff is just very obviously a insecure kind of mental behavior, especially from a leader. So he's posted all over the place, and it's like kind of in black and white, and they're told never to go across this wall. Do never go to the wall. And him and this young girl one day kind of see a hole through the wall, and it's like a brightly colored Alice in Wonderland hell kind of weird place. And there's this young cat, like this animal cat, saying he's hurt, and that's genuinely creepy, like this whole trap area. But what happens is eventually, of course, the worlds kind of collide, and we're having these two different kind of religious orders, one of which seems to be more in, I guess, in the style of like a pagan kind of worship the mother, like Mother Nature kind of aspect, more sexual Wicker Man style stuff. And then we have the cold kind of calculated, you know, orderly place. And they're going to combine, and all hell's going to break loose where there's riots and there's people being shot and there's mutations and people just kind of going in their own way to try to hurt other people. It's a very bizarre film, and we get the backstory of Cain, and we realize who he is and where he came from and these other kind of gods and entities and things like that. And And it's kind of explained reality, kind of I think what his take on kind of religion to a certain extent is, if that. I mean, he's not necessarily trying to say something except tell a crazy, insane story, and I think it works really well. I think these movies work and kind of just that warped aspect, and you never watch this and think he doesn't know what he doesn't like. You ever watch a movie and you're like, they don't know what they're saying here, or not that, but they don't know their own mythology, they don't know the backstory here. I feel like he knows everything that's going on here. There's so much effort put forth, and in the commentaries he talks about how long rendering took. And it has M. Strange on there. It's also a fellow animator who helped work on this. And I can't remember who the third person on the commentary is. Oh geez, whatnot. So, but yeah, I thought When Blackbirds Fly was an improvement in terms of filmmaking. I don't know which one I prefer. I think that they both have their positives and whatnot and negatives. I think that Where the Dead Go to Die probably has some more stuff that's a little bit more bothersome. But honestly, When Blackbirds Fly had some stuff that actually was just genuinely unsettling too. So they're kind of close. But as far as extras, original cut, extended cut. The original cut is an hour and 45. The extended cut is an hour and 51. And then we have commentary, and then we have deleted scenes, voice acting reel, propaganda galleries, Damona Hagen versus Aesthetic. And then here's where we have some short films. Aesthetic here. This seems like his newest short film, and this is by far one of the best things I've ever seen in terms of disturbing animation. It has some sort of like monk sect that's feeding something to this god, and they get pulled into this world, and it is incredibly disturbing and fucked up, and I thought it was wonderful, and the animation was actually really good and just gross and perfect. And then we have Recluse. I think this is the one where the little creature kind of... there's one of those that's really bothersome where this guy feeds this little creature something and it follows him home. That kind of bothered me. And then Snuff Porn Holocaust, crazy weird music video with a lot of fucking. And then action figure things where these are really... He made these when he's really young and they're just completely bonkers following the ScreamerClauz action figure thing. But yeah, these are pretty well done. Disc, of course, and this is what Jimmy ScreamerClauz does for a living, is render disc and author disc and stuff like that. So yeah. The one thing I did notice on this is the main feature, if you're watching it, surround sounds and stuff like that are really weird when you're running through this. A lot of the sound mixes here are 5.1, but this sound mix on here is LP, the CM one or whatever, But when you're listening to the surround, you have a couple dropouts. When you change it to standard, you don't have those dropouts. So that could be my surround sound system setup, or maybe something needs an update. But I've had that kind of stuff before, so depends. But anyways, two great releases from MVD and Jimmy ScreamerClauz. Check them out. Okay, we're going to do another one from the Die Gothic set here, Volume 2, and we're going to tackle Haunted Castle, actually by the same director of The Demon of Mount Om and The Betrayal. The Betrayal is a fantastic movie from Radiant Films. I highly recommend that. And this is one of the subgenre here, the Haunted Castle of the, Bakeneko? That is basically the kind of haunted, kind of cat subgenre of Japanese films. And there's a great supplemental feature on the Haunted Castle from 1969 here, a little supplement feature on here. This is from Radiant Films, of course, where it talks about a brief history of the kind of haunted ghost cat movies from Japan, and they say they originate from kind of 3 stories, and this is one, of course, and they kind of been adapted numerous times. In fact, this director has actually adapted one before, and he adapted one after, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, The Haunted Castle from 69, kind of a typical period piece kind of movie where we have this blind man who has a sister that he very much deeply cares for, and he's a genuinely good person. We have this kind of lord that wants the blind woman as his concubine, and he wants her no matter what. This blind man knows that his sister's really not fit for this. She doesn't want to do it, so he kind of says, listen, she's not good for it. And then in a game of, I think, chess, something along those lines, this lord makes a cheat move, and the blind man calls him out, and he kills him. He kills the blind man, and he decides to take the sister as his concubine, but before she can be taken, she commits suicide, and her beloved house cat, her spirit kind of goes in this beloved house cat, and that's kind of where we start having these kind of possession films where like a woman's kind of possessed by like this weird cat creature thing. It's like this cat kind of turn into the woman and float around. The one thing that I noticed, a couple things I noticed about this movie is the lighting is fantastic, the sets are fantastic, the cinematography, all that stuff is top notch. The FX are really good for 1969, kind of shockingly good, and they really kind of really make a couple great scares in here that actually was haunting kind of stuff here. Well, there's a scene where we have our characters in the foreground and we have the kind of open houses in Japan, and there's a hallway that we see in the background. And we see this thing. What they do is they take kind of like some sort of very lightweight kite kind of style thing that's shaped in that form, and they pull it across the screen really quick. But I've seen that used to the modern day, and they just pull this thing in the background really fast, and it looks like this flying ghost. And I was like, oh, that was unsettling, very, very unsettling, and worked really well. But of course, you know, this cat ghost is going to start picking off people responsible. It cursed the whole clan, so people start getting picked off, and you know, some more women at first, and it starts to move its way higher up to the ranks. The one disappointing thing here is maybe necessarily not everyone you want to die dies, but we have kind of a showdown standoff with the Japanese Catwoman ghost thing, and our main kind of character, who's more heroic, not involved really with this clan. He kind of is more of a, you know, just character in comparison to the other clan members. But the Haunted Castle, I think it looks fantastic. I think it does tend to get a tiny bit tedious at the end, where I was kind of shocked for the short runtime that it did feel like it was repeating itself a little bit, but I was just kind of in awe of how well this was done in terms of like sets and acting, and just how professional the movie looked for kind of just a little ghost movie. Not all that many movies would go the extra distance to be so polished and well done. But as far as the special features are concerned, we have a new interview with J-horror filmmaker Mari Asada, and The Strange Case of Ukumori, a visual essay by Tom Mez. The original essay here by Mari Sato, she talks about the history of the ghost Catwoman and stuff, and that's very interesting and intriguing, and the kind of Japanese horror kind of getting another kick in the J-horror stuff. And then The Strange Case of what is that? Kuko Mori, a visual essay by Tom Mez. It's 6 minutes. It talks about the lead actress in here who plays the Catwoman. It talks about her history of her being the Snake Woman first, then the Catwoman, and even a kind of a criminal case she was involved with. This is very interesting and adds context to the movie. Looks fantastic. Sounds fantastic. I think this is one of the best looking Japanese ghost stories I've seen, but to be honest, I've never seen a bad looking Japanese ghost story that was an old film, so this is no different. The Haunted Castle. Okay, we're going to hop into disc 2 of the Truth or Dare legacy here. So the first one up is 1994's Wicked Games, the sequel to Truth or Dare. And, between this and the first Truth or Dare and the second, we had, I think, Killing Spree was in there. And what else? Did he direct anything else between those two? I'm not 100% sure. Creep was 95, so this is 94. So, yeah, we're going to hop into Wicked Games. Now, I covered Wicked Games a couple times on my channel, and I said that this was an improvement on the original Truth or Dare, and I actually still think it is. This is probably my favorite Truth or Dare movie, and maybe my favorite Tim Ritter movie, honestly, if I look back, when we're going to go through the Tim Ritter other box set too eventually. But so, Wicked Games, we all followed kind of the Sunnyville kind of location here. Sunnyville Asylum is where Mike Strawber is. Mike Strawber's still alive. He was the original killer from the first movie. And basically, we have kind of Dan Hess, who is a detective in Joel D. Wynkoop. Love him in this. And a guy who ends up being Mike Strawber's cousin is best friends with Dan Hess. He's a private eye, and he walks in and his wife's cheating on him in the kind of similar fashion. He does pull a gun, though, and he's kind of broken up about it. And he goes to live with his detective buddy Dan Hess, who is into some kinky stuff, S&M, things like that. So it's kind of pushing the envelope there, which Tim Ritter actually was kind of doing that a lot back in the day. Surprisingly so. If you look back in the content, you're like, oh, Tim Ritter is pushing it. A lot of those SCV movies work. But, so what happens is some murders start to happen, and there are people that are cheating on their significant other. So Joel D. Wynkoop, being the detective, is a little weary of his friend who almost committed suicide in his house, and there's another doctor kind of involved that they all kind of go to, and a lot of the characters go to. So they're all kind of invested in this kind of situation here, and some of the killings are absolutely over the top and ridiculous, like death by sprinkler, and you're like, what the fuck is this? It's so weird, though. Tim Ritter explains in the commentaries he's always trying to find deaths that he hadn't seen in a movie, so death by sprinkler, I guess, is one of them. Perfect Florida kill, if that makes sense to anybody. But So as it goes on, every once in a while, there is comedy in the first Truth or Dare, and it's, maybe sometimes it kind of ruins the tone or something along those lines. This one, it does seem a little out of place here and there, but it's more serious than anything, and I think it does fit, and especially with the ending. This is what makes this movie kind of brilliant overall. In a weird way, and I'll explain that when we get to it, and I'll include spoilers. But there's a scene where a character, takes a woman out to the woods, and he's like, hey, time to put out. She refuses, of course, and he goes to attack her, and he runs back, and he grabs the sandwich, takes a bite first. She's like, what is that in there? And listen to the commentaries. Joel D. Wynkoop's like, I had him do that. And, because they co-directed this, and it's very funny. Like, if you know Joel D. Wynkoop's, films, acting, and stuff, you're like, that's kind of perfect. That's in there now. But, this one is fairly sleazy, more nudity than the first film, and I guess more gore too, even though it's cheaper, and whatnot. But by the end of it, we kind of realize that It's perfect. And I do want to spoil this just because I want to talk about how well this ending actually did. There's a snuff version of this movie, too, that was re-edited in the early 2000s with a bunch of extra footage because they shot this movie twice, so they had tons and tons of footage. So I remember the snuff edition being even gorier and weirder and crazier and actually really good as well. And that's probably why that's embedded as my head, is just that the Wicked Games snuff and the regular edition, it's just a wild, weird movie, and I think that it's just a little underappreciated. It almost made my top 10 of 94, believe it or not, when I did it. But, so, the ending here, spoilers. Then I'll talk about features after. So, it turns out that there's actually 3 killers, and one's Dan Hess. And one is, of course, at the very end, he does decide to kill his ex-wife, or his wife and her boyfriend. And then the doctor is somebody as well who had mental problems, and he didn't like how these women were kind of prancing in front of him, refusing to marry him. So, we realize that there's all 3 of these different killers who have used this whole kind of, thing to carry out their, their crimes, and under the guise that somebody else would be blamed for it, the copper mask, and they're all wearing the copper mask. And it comes to this idea, and they're talking about it, and you're like, oh, that's so fucking crazy that all of them are killers. And it snaps too, and we have a Wizard of Oz style ending where Mike Strawberry's literally sitting in the insane asylum imagining all this, and these are his 3 doctors. And that makes a lot of sense, though, that Mike Strawberry, who's been kind of haunted by betrayal and somebody cheating, his entire world mentally, everybody in there is either a cheater or somebody who's going to kill a cheater, and it all revolves around that's all he's completely obsessed with. And you're like, that makes a lot of sense in his weird kind of wild world. In the first film, he had these ideas that people were putting grenades in their mouth and blowing their heads. So it does make a lot of sense that this would kind of work like that. And I think it works perfect for the SOV. This is one of the better SOV movies, I would say. I was talking about Hugh Gallagher's movies, and I enjoy those. And Wicked Games is one of my favorites, too. And I throw in the Tempe movies and stuff, like Bloodletting, and I love that movie, Burning Moon, as well, and Redneck Zombies. But I think that Wicked Games is one of those ones that's a little, it gets thrown with the Truth or Dare films. People don't think much on its own, but I think it's an incredibly clever movie. And I think Joel D is a lot of fun in it. And there's a couple good lines in here. I could not... What's the guy when he actually you realize he is the killer? It's like, why, you were scot-free, why'd you kill him? I couldn't deny myself the pleasure of killing them. And I was like, that's pretty twisted. As far as the features, hopefully it's on here. I don't know if they're all on here. I'll have to remember off the top of my head then, because I'm not seeing them. But there is like a making of Wicked Games, if I'm not mistaken, where it talks about, Tim Ritter actually getting in trouble with the Florida Film Commission and everything for filming on the beach and all that kind of stuff like that. And there's a nice little documentary about that. And then there's a couple commentaries, one old with Tim Ritter, again, packed with a bunch of information. And one with Joel D. Wynkoop and his wife, where they talk a lot, and he has a good memory, and he makes jokes, and he talks about what he put in there and all the different scenes and reshooting this movie twice. They both talk about that, but I thought this one looked pretty good. I know the first one they kind of did this upscale, and I didn't like how it looked, but they included the original version. This one I didn't notice that much of an upscale. I thought it looked pretty good for Wicked Games for an SOV movie, so recommend Wicked Games. Okay, the next one in the Truth or Dare Legacy set is Screaming for Sanity Part 3, and this is made in the later 90s. And I guess there's 3 versions of this movie, and I saw the original DVD that was put out by SRS, so that was probably the shortest version, and I remember really liking that. And I guess when they reissued it on Blu-ray, there was kind of a longer version of it, and this, I guess, is the original, showed in theaters for a little bit, longer original VHS cut. Nobody's seen this since the VHS days, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. This movie's like an hour and 45 minutes, and that's just kind of a no for an SOV movie. It's too long, and I'm going to be honest with that. I love that Joel D. Wynkoop stars in this one, and we kind of carry his actual character, Dr. Hess, from Wicked Games. And I love hearing Tim Ritter's original idea for Screaming for Sanity, which was supposed to be the first sequel where he had Kamel Keaton, Linnea Quigley, and David Hess all signed on to do this kind of budget kind of film where David Hess was going to come back, and he was the father of, the baby who was killed in the first film, and him and Kamel Keaton and Linnea Quigley were going to go through this whole Sunnyvale town and just massacre everyone. I was like, that sounds brilliant, that sounds fun. And all the projects you hear about, like David Hess never got to do and stuff, like Last House on Dead End Street 2. That wasn't it. No, Last House on Dead End Street 2 had Van Bever, who was going to be in that one. But there's a lot of these subjects, like what was the one he was supposed to be in that never happened? House on the Edge of the Park 2. Sorry about that, mixing them up. But just all these kind of lost projects from that time that would have been really cool, and I think this one would have been awesome. So basically what we have here is the victims are kind of standing out. Mike Strawberry has been made kind of like a, I guess, a local kind of infamous hero in the terms of Jeffrey Dahmer or Ed Gein or somebody like that, and people are making money off the murders in him and whatnot, selling autographs to serial killers and whatnot. So this victim who lost his son in the first film and his wife is very upset. He's in a mental institution as well, and he gets out and he kind of snaps. And there's not really a mystery about it. He goes around and starts killing people that are profiting all this, and he kind of has his eyes set on Dan Hess, who's recently been fired from his job as the doctor there, because he is one of the original people that was responsible for releasing Mike Strawbro on accident when he escaped and ended up having his kid killed. So that's kind of the plot of this. It's an hour and 45 minutes. I think there's some interesting concepts about it. I think, the idea that people are obsessed with serial killers is a nice touch in there, because that's been going on for a while, and I like this idea of putting a film this early on. And there is a very bizarre actress in here who, like, I think in the commentary they talk about it, she like brought her boyfriend there, and the boyfriend actually gives in a really good performance, really intense, insane performance, almost seems like he's not acting. And she does give a weird, very bizarre performance, and you can tell she's a little out there, I would say, in terms of what they were saying in the commentary, and it kind of shows across in her performance. Now, Screaming for Sanity on the DVD, I guess all the nudity was cut out. And this is packed with a lot of nudity, a lot of stuff like that, a lot of sleazy, kind of sexy stuff. There's one scene when, like, Joel D. Wynkoop is literally in a hotel room, and this lady basically gives him a lap dance for like 5 minutes, and you're like, that's definitely padded in there. And Ritter talks about, I started my movie career making a $250,000 movie, and by the end of it, I was making like a $2,500 movie, and it's like, I can't believe I did that. Like, maybe I should have stopped earlier or whatnot, but it is what it is at the time. And you're like, I kind of can understand that. I've seen a lot of indie filmmakers and people like that make all these movies and push so forward so hard and things like that, and there's always these people from the sidelines cheering them on without understanding how much effort they're putting forth. Some of them probably do, but it always feel weird about that. It's like, you should follow your dreams. Why? Because you didn't, and you want to vicariously live through their film. But it's a weird kind of thing, and I don't want to point fingers at anybody, but I always felt like that was a really, really hard fucking way to make a living, and no one actually ever makes a living from it. They never have. They go, oh, they're doing this as a side gig, and then they have 6 jobs with no insurance, and it's like, that doesn't pay off forever. It doesn't, rarely ever pays off, but I appreciate Tim Ritter's dedication to the films, and I don't love Screaming for Sanity as much as Wicked Games. I don't like it as much as the first one either, and I bet if I rewatch maybe one of the other cuts, I might appreciate it a little bit more. I just think this one ran a little too long. I do appreciate the big fight scene at the end with Dan Hess, Joel D. Wynkoop, and I think he's good in this, and it's good seeing him star, but I prefer his performance in part 2. I think he was perfect in that movie, and 1 he's fun too. But yeah, overall, Screaming for Sanity I like. I don't love it. There's interviews with people on here, including Tim Ritter, and one of the actresses in Screaming for Sanity as well, and then the 2 commentaries. So a nice release from SRS. I thought this one looked a little wonky. I think it was upscaled. It didn't look as good as, the Wicked Games, but that might just be my eyes. All right, we're going to get in some 2025 movies here, and the first one up is Witchboard, the remake from Chuck Russell. Now, I love Chuck Russell's The Blob from '88, and I love Chuck Russell's 1987 A Nightmare on Elm Street 3. The Dream Warriors. So I was like, oh, Chuck Russell's making a movie, and you never know what they've been doing, or I'm sure he's been working in some kind of TV film or doing something. But I was like, that's kind of interesting, the original Kevin Tenney movie from '86. I remember liking. It's not one that I kept watching over and over. I watched Night of the Demons a million times, but Witchboard was one that I watched a couple times, enjoyed. Didn't have any like super affinity for it or closeness to the movie. So I was like, interesting, they're remaking. What a bizarre thing. And so I noticed this one is 8 minutes shy of 2 hours, which is fucking bonkers. Like, legacy sequel remake thing, don't fucking make it 2 hours. That's ridiculous, especially when the movie's going to be on a budget. Cut something. The worst thing that ever happened to streaming is the worst thing that ever happened to editing was streaming. That's all I got to say. But so the story follows, what we have is, I don't even remember how this thing opens up. It does jump back in time here and there, but we have this kind of guys. It opens up kind of like Wishmaster 2, right, where they're like trying to rob this thing in the museum. I think that's how Wishmaster 2 ends up. But we have a couple guys trying to steal this ancient Ouija board, and one of them, or Witchboard, let's call it the Witchboard. I don't know if it's technically a Ouija board or what. But one of them tries to double cross the other one. He gets killed in the process, and we don't understand how the other guy gets out, but he does. The Ouija board ends up making it in the middle of the woods while a recovering drug addict and her boyfriend, who's going to open a new Cajun restaurant, kind of stumble across it. They're like, this would be great for the restaurant. Put it in there. They put it in there. They start working. Almost immediately, things are not right. One of the cooks is like, I don't like this thing, yada, yada, yada. We're introduced to all the characters. They're decent. We have this kind of turmoil because the guy who opened the restaurant's ex-girlfriend is always kind of around. She's a highly intelligent, sophisticated person into all this like kind of ancient kind of culture and religions and whatnot, and that kind of all ties in. Weird things start happening. One of the best kills is probably the first kill. I think it was the best done. Is somebody actually loses their hand, because in the beginning we kind of realized that they use kind of familiars, the witches, and they kind of like to take people's hands and things like that. The familiars are of course cats. The cat stuff is really cute, really well done, big kind of cool cat. But the first death in here is actually the best done in terms of the kill and whatnot, with the cut off hand and all that kind of stuff like that. But after that, we realized that we're probably like 40 minutes into the movie, and as it progresses, we get that kind of generic kind of, hey, I'm a drug addict trying to overcome that stuff, and it's been done to death as of the last 10-15 years with the Evil Dead remake and a million other movies. So I was like, okay, is she going to relapse and then hide the relapse we have? Oh, well, maybe she's possessed by the Witchboard, kind of more of possession film, and this turns less into a Witchboard movie and more into your standard kind of possession, coming back from the past, kind of a possessing someone of the modern day kind of thing. And I'm tired of it. I'm just not my thing. I'm not here for it. Is it the worst movie ever made? Absolutely not. But there's a couple things that really stand out that get tedious. And like I said, this movie had me at the first 30-40 minutes, and it completely lost me. And we start to add this kind of really bad CGI in here, and there's really poor CGI blood spray. The one thing you shouldn't do with, and it's coming from me like it matters, like I'm somebody important, but I'm just saying, for me personally, I don't mind CGI. If I'm complaining about a lot of CGI already, you already lost me somewhere. But CGI blood spray is the worst thing. Like, even if you don't feel like, even if you use practical and you feel like, oh, well, wait, a little bit more blood will hurt. A lot of times, if you make it that obvious, it looks terrible. And most of this film has a lot of bad CGI blood spray. There's a great massacre scene that would be actually good if they used a lot more practical effects, in the vein of kind of Wishmaster 2 or Hellraiser 3. But it doesn't. It kind of has this bad CGI, and I just lost interest in this. And by the end of it, I didn't care anymore. I think that it has too much mythology for what it is, when I think that this movie should be bare bones, kind of stripped down to the core, just fun 80s kind of throwback thing, or not even an 80s throwback. Just, I think it needs to be shorter. I think it needs to be more straight to the point. I think it needs to just be regular people, for the most part. I don't remember somebody's gonna be like, well, in the original Witchboard, this person had all this trauma and whatnot. And I'm not saying that Trauma Horse sucks or anything like that, but what movies need it? Does Witchboard fucking need this kind of like backstory here? I don't know if it needs it. It's a story they wanted to tell. It doesn't work for me. I think it's boring. I think it's generic. I think it's cheap, but it doesn't mean anything. I think that there's some... it's not poorly shot or anything either. It's just a boring script to me. It's just snooze fest, bad CGI, and it lost me. But the cat's cute, and it starts off intriguing enough, but it fades really quick for me. That's Witchboard 2025. I don't know. Chuck Russell made 2 great horror films. Maybe there's a third in them. Maybe there's not. I don't know. Okay, this next one is this comes back to Mrparka's bad movie picks, right? Here we go. Him. This one... I went and seen it. It looked intriguing, looked weird, looked wild. I didn't really know what to expect. Hadn't heard anything. Saw it opening night. Get back, I was like, I enjoyed that. I really liked that movie. I didn't think it was a masterpiece or anything, but I was like, good, solid, weird-ass, kind of maybe a little bit directionalist at the very ending, maybe some unearned stuff, but I thought that yes, it's obvious in what it's saying to a certain extent, but maybe a little weird too. And I was like, I like that. And then everybody was shitting on it. And I don't really grasp why. My hand is not on the pulse of modern horror anymore. I don't know where I'm going, right? But like I said, Long Walk, don't watch that. I think you should watch Long Walk, but I wasn't a huge fan of it or anything like that. But I'm like, but you should watch him, which everybody hates. So essentially what we have here is an all-star football player who is, he's like a king college player, and everybody's scouting him. He goes to I can't remember what the hell they call that thing where you go and try out for all the professional leagues. Man, I'm not a huge football fan. Not that I dislike it, I just don't keep up on it. But you go and you show off your talents and everything, your strength, your all that kind of stuff like that. And he's going to show off his talents, but the day before, somebody hits him in the back of the head and he gets a really bad head injury. This head injury kind of prevents him from trying out. So he is really upset with himself. His whole life he did this. The actor, Something Withers, he played, and I Still Knew You Did last summer. And he turns in a really good performance in this one here. But so he's really upset with himself. He kind of turns to like drinking and drugs and things like that. But then he gets invited to kind of try out in kind of a reclusive, secret kind of place with the best football player of all time. The GOAT is what they call him. If anybody follows sports, a lot of people say John Jones is the GOAT, but everybody knows Fedor is the GOAT. I'm just kidding. I'm just trying to start the argument. But anyways, the GOAT or anything like that, greatest of all time when it comes to football, and it's Marlon Wayans. And I will say that Marlon Wayans has always been an underrated actor. Every time I've seen him in movies, even in the comedies like The Sixth Man or something like that with the Haunted, the Ghost basketball movie. I always liked him, but I always thought he was fantastic in Requiem for a Dream. He's probably my favorite in that of the main 4 cast members. I think he has the most touching, relatable story, to me at least. Maybe Ellen Burstyn as well. But I think he steals the show in this movie, and I think a lot of what makes this movie work for me is Marlon Wayans. And he's this like GOAT football player, and he brings the young guy to the camp, even though he has this head injury, right? This head injury that if it gets messed up, he could, ruin his career, ruin his life. But they start to push him into camp for 1 week, and he decides to go, and he's going to do all these like high tests. And at first, like, people come in, and it's really a twisted, kind of fucked up thing, and you realize this is all for football. And lately, I've been listening to the last podcast, and I had heard the story of Aaron Hernandez before, but I didn't know it more in depth. And kind of listening to all that CTE stuff, and then talk about Aaron Hernandez and how that pressure was on him to be the best, to have that kind of attitude, and that really helped add some context to this. Although I know the competitive nature of football and sports and those things, that everything is put on the line for this. Your whole life is put on there. People make sacrifices for you, expecting you to do this, and you feel obligated to do it. All that kind of pressure and stuff like that put into this idea. But of course, there is some sort of twist at the end. But I don't know if you'd even call it a twist. It's kind of all pointing to this. And at the very end, it gets real weird and real surreal and real gory. And I don't necessarily know if they earned that 100%. But I think that the ride getting there was cool. And I think that Marlon Wayans being completely unhinged at parts of this movie was great. And I like the story of it. I enjoyed the little story. I don't know if this is a feature-length movie. Like you I don't know if you can get that many more miles out of this, man, because it does seem to be like kind of, it could have been a little bit shorter. Maybe this shouldn't be a feature-length, but for what they did, I thought they did a pretty good job. I thought it was well acted, well made, violent enough, weird enough, and it's more of a visual film. And I know people can put that stuff in there. It's in there, the CTE, the idea that ultra competitive nature and the head trauma, all that kind of shit like that is definitely in here. That Americana football worship shit, sports worship, it's definitely in here, and I think it works for me. It might not work for you, might not work for many people, but I got to be true to myself. And when I walked out there, I said, man, I enjoyed that. I thought that was pretty good, and it might be something I'd rewatch. And there's some stuff that I was kind of harder on than I should have been, probably, like Bring Her Back and Weapons, and I'll definitely rewatch those two at the end of the year, because I think they're good movies. No matter how I feel personally about them, I think those two are good films, and I give them a recommend, and I like them. But some stuff I don't like. I think 28 Years Later is a piece of shit, and like I'm just shocked that people like it. Like I just, what are you guys seeing that I'm not? And like I could see what they're seeing, but I just see that the other shit is clouding it so much that it's not worth seeing. That's my personal opinion. But I liked him. I thought it was pretty entertaining, interesting. Maybe not completely cooked, but pretty damn close to being done for me. Okay, the Patreon pick is Coronered. And I think Nick Mua picked this. This is a kind of a low-budget slasher from the early 2010, 9, somewhere, I can't remember exactly. Maybe even later than that. But this definitely has the cover art where it looks like The Collector or The Collected or something like that. And I don't know which one came out first. I remember the cover art of The Coronered. But yeah, this is kind of a slasher film with a small cast, isolated, trapped in a certain one location kind of deal here. Steve Guttenberg is in here. James Duvall is in here. Really like James Duvall. I think he's a good actor. Steve Guttenberg is an actor I've seen in a couple things. Not a guy I'm super familiar with, does a fine job in this. So basically about 5 or 6 people are in this kind of store after hours. In the beginning, we kind of realize it sets the stage for there's a serial killer or slasher going around, and he's kind of attacking a lot of like supermarkets, little marketplaces, kind of in and out market kind of deals. And the guy's delivering a beer, and they start to get to talking. Now all the people there are like, man, what would you do if you caught this guy? And they tell all these elaborate ways to kill them, yada yada yada. I do this, I do that. And then we kind of learn who the characters are. We have the owner, who's kind of like a drunk, loud, brash kind of guy, and then we have his nephew and James Duvall, who's going through withdrawal. We have a worker who's an overweight lady who's constantly eating ice cream, and then another worker of his who's one of the main characters called Donut. They call him Donut Don or something like that, or Donnie, and he's always eating donuts. So these two characters are basically just essentially what they eat, although they do have some fun character moments. And then we have a prostitute there as well, that of course Donut Donnie is in love with. So we kind of have that element here. They end up getting trapped in there overnight because some crazy set of circumstances, and of course we know the killer's in there. And it kind of slow for a long time. There's not a kill right away, but they do take the time to kind of build their characters, make some comedic jokes that do land sometimes. Of course, the overweight girl lady has this funny sex hotline gag, which kind of is jokey and whatnot, decent. And of course, you know, they all said how they're going to kill the killer, and we all know damn well that they're all going to die like that. Some of the deaths are fairly grueling. It's not overly gratuitous. The special effects aren't top-notch. The acting is decent. The characters are fine as well, and it's got a really nasty, dark ending. Coronered is okay. I don't think it's great. I think it's fine. I don't think it's brilliant. I think it's low budget, and I think that they understood that they had a low budget and they had to keep it to one location, and I think that was smart of them. Do I think it's going to be, it's an amazing, groundbreaking movie? No. But do I think it's a good way to waste 90 minutes? Possibly. So check out Coronered if it sounds like it's up your alley. I mean, there is, of course, a twist, but the way they try to throw you off from the twist is pretty cheap. But it's Coronered, and I did like most of the characters, even though I don't know if I'd call them two-dimensional, but they're a little bit better than one-dimensional, I'd say. All right, let's get these questions, comments, concerns. Ken Coakley. I watched The Killer Must Kill again for the first time in years. I thought it was so back then, but this movie grew on me. The film had it all. Suspense, thrills, laughs. Well, I provided the laughs. Were from myself. Luca the Italian super stud gave me plenty of ammo. He was a handsome paisan. Is that paisan how you spell that? I don't think I've ever had to say that word. But he was really slimy. What else would you call someone who pushes his girlfriend into sex, leaves her alone in a creepy place, and while he's out getting her food, finds another woman and bangs her even though he referred to her as a broad? The hired killer. You know, that guy, the boyfriend's a piece of shit. Slimy piece of shit. That's a great way. The hired killer was freaky looking with no eyebrows and a bad habit of drooling. He looked like the replicant from Blade Runner that didn't pass inspection. I could have sworn that I saw him drooling on Luca's girlfriend after he finished with her. Lucky her. Yeah, that's the guy from The Beyond, right? Shrek. The film seemed to have a bit of Hitchcock in certain parts. Alessio Arano played Luca, but he looked like Ivan Rasimov. I thought he was Rasimov. Yeah, he looks a lot like young Ivan Rasimov. I also watched Night of the Reaper. The casting for this was unusual. Instead of using attractive actors, he used bland-looking actors. I know it's supposed to take place in the 80s, and like Madman, the women are bland-looking. It also looks like it was shot on tape with tracking lines on screen. They had homes and stores decorated with Halloween decorations, which I liked. I gave it a 7 out of 10. Yeah, I'll watch that one. I'm going to watch that one probably next week. Speaking of Halloween season, are you going to Cinema Wasteland? If so, are you going to shoot some footage? I hope you do, because I'm going to miss Halloween again this year, but I'm getting stronger. I'm glad to hear that. I am going to Cinema Wasteland. I'll try to shoot some footage. This comment smells of death. Thanks, Dave. You just saved me some money. I was about to order that Killer Must Kill Again Blu-ray, but after watching those clips you posted, all I could say is no thanks. What were they thinking? Virana, too long. I'll happily watch another hour of Jasmine doing her thing. I'm not surprised that she has such a cult following in India. Travis Linscomb. Honestly, the DVD for Killer Must Kill Again doesn't look bad. I'm glad you reviewed that because I'll stick with the DVD until someone else tries a remaster. I could see VS or Severn putting it out, and they wouldn't release something looking like that. No, hopefully that Rustblade does a new release, better one. Big Frizzle, I notice a lot of people neglect Bollywood and Mexican horror. Can you recommend some English dubbed? The more cheesy, the better. Somebody, Ilk Vomit, says Grave Robbers. This comment of death says get some Santo in your life. I would agree with both of those. But if you want cheesy, I definitely would go with the Santo. Like the Riders of Death from 1970, the kind of Western kind of horror one with the, I think it has a dubbed and a subbed version with the leopard characters where all blamed for all the murders. That one is a lot of fun. Grave Robbers, I will definitely back up. The Galendo movie, Ruben Galendo Jr. is a fantastic movie. Grave Robbers and Cemetery of Terror. I think Grave Robbers is a little better, but Cemetery of Terror is almost just as good. They're both fantastic, little kind of very gothic, crypt-like kind of horror films from Mexico. I don't remember if they are, I think they are in Spanish, so you'd have to read subtitles. Bollywood, I don't know if Bollywood dubbed a lot of their movies. I never really watched any of the dub stuff, but one I will recommend from Bollywood is Hotel from 1981, which is kind of, I guess, their take on Beyond. It's very long, and there's a scene where this guy gets killed, and he's like stumbling down the stairs the whole time. Like it's a fun one. I like Hotel, but of course you got that the Nightmare on Elm Street one, Mockcalville Hall, whatever the fuck. That movie's wild and weird as on top of that. But if you're big into the Bollywood and the Mexican, may I recommend some Indonesian horror films? And if you like the kind of crazy, wild stuff like that, I would say check out some Indonesian films. I would start with the Siswara Gunawan Putra movies. Like Satan's Slaves is really serious and well done. So it's like if you're looking for cheesy, I don't know if I'd go with that one, but I would definitely hop into some of the Indonesian horror films. Go to the most popular ones like Mystics in Bali and Queen of Black Magic are definitely must, and of course Satan's Slaves. But Bollywood ones, I would recommend Hotel off the top of my head. As far as Mexican, I say the Galendo Jr. movies are great and the Santo movies are great. And there's a whole slew of 60s ones that are more popular that I'm not super familiar with, but there's one that I wouldn't call cheesy, but it's a really good horror film. It is the skeleton of Mrs. Morales, and it's more more of a thriller, dark comedy, but it's brilliant. And that's a Mexican one. And even the one that's more of a giallo style is Even the Wind is Afraid, which is pretty good too. But these aren't cheesy. If you're looking for cheesy, go Santo. Santo's the king of cheesiness, and he's fun. And then we got Beyond Sour Ground. Man, I'm disappointed to hear Transfer Killer Must Kill Again is poor. I don't have them on a Macabre DVD, so I've been waiting for years for that one to come back. Yeah, I'd really like it to have a nicer release. It was very disappointing. Maybe I'll have to revisit Necromantic movies one day and give them a second chance since it's been years since I've seen them. I do not recall thinking that Necromantic 2 is vastly superior to the original. It's longer. I think it's a better art film, but hey, if you're not looking for art, then steer clear. And it probably didn't help that I saw Necromantic 2 before I saw the original, but it does help that the animal cruelty footage in that sequel isn't as gratuitous and frankly pretentious. Yeah, the first one has the rabbit, and it's like done in reverse. The second one's basically those weirdos that are obsessed with like gore and stuff watching the seal get clubbed, which is disturbing, maybe even more so, but not made directly for the movie. Even though I'm not a fan of the series, the climax to Necromantic 2 is an absolute classic gore scene. Totally in agreement there. I mean, that is iconic. I'm a bit perplexed why The Last Shark is still controversial to this day. You would think Cruel Jaws would be the bigger problem movie, but I was hoping, really, and that didn't go without controversy to that release. But I was hoping Severin would release a Region A-friendly version of The Last Shark, since they've done practically all the other Italian shark movies. It's also beyond time we get a legit version of Abby, the blaxploitation version of Exorcist as well. Mr. how long have you been region-free, and would you recommend it? Ever since I had a DVD player, I've been region-free. So, the late 90s. 2000, late 90s. I've always been region free. I would highly recommend it. Do you think it was worth the expense of the player? I never wanted to go down the rabbit hole buying region free locked discs because it gives me another excuse to buy even more movies. But it's frustrating when films like The Last Shark come out and I know I have no reason to own them. Here's what it is. I was talking to some friends once, and they got into collecting after me. And I was collecting all the friends that collected around my time or before. They're like, region free is the only way to go, and that's how I am too. But they are basically in the mindset that now it's not really worth updating to the region-free thing because most of the stuff gets released anyways. I honestly, if you're into features, if you're into supplemental features because they're different and different masters, you should be region-free. If you're only in it for the movie, you'll miss out on some, but most of them will get a re-release. But not all. Like Last Shark, I don't think is coming out here that I know of. But I would always say go for it. It's only like $100, $150 or something like that. You probably spend that on movies every 2 weeks. So, Nick from Flanders. I really liked the first Deadpool, but the second one was too repetitive for my taste. Hate him or love him, Ryan Reynolds can be funny, but some of the jokes get old, real fast. I might check out the third one because I admire Hugh Jackman, Aaron Stanford, and Marina Baccarin. As actors, The Long Walk seems interesting at first glance, but hasn't Francis Lawrence already tackled the old totalitarian government trope several times with the ever-expanding Hunger Games franchise? He absolutely has, although I am not a Hunger Games guy. I've not watched them. I stuck with Battle Royale. But, Hunger Games came out of the weird time where it seemed like, this is going to be weird, it was more aimed at teen kids than adults, so I didn't see them. I'm sure they're fine. I'm probably alone in the... did I forget a page here? I think I did. Sorry about that, guys, but The Long Walk seems interesting at first, but hasn't Francis Lawrence already tackled the old totalitarian government trope several times with the ever-expanding Hunger Games franchise? I'm probably alone in this, but the Hunger Games trilogy, books, and film quadrilogy handles the subject much better and in a more inventive way. See, I don't know. I haven't seen them. Like, at the time those came out, they were, like, more gravitated towards teens, so it's like, I'm sure they're fine. But I was always a Battle Royale guy, so when I saw Battle Royale, loved it, and then I was like, oh, this is like, everybody had that big, like, push, like, this is a ripoff of Battle Royale, and then... So I didn't see it. I don't know if it's bad or not. It doesn't interest me, to be honest, at this point. I saw part of it, and it seemed really cheesy in a bad way. And I like cheese, but it just seemed embarrassing. But I could be wrong. Maybe we're all a bit Stephen King'd out at the present. Yes? Maybe. Questions. One, you probably guessed it, as you're an avid runner, Sir Mrparka. How long do you reckon you would last during the long walk, and what would you choose as your prize if you actually won? If we go to the long walk and we're like age 35 to 40 or like 36 to like 45 or 42 or something like that, I can walk pretty far. If I have nice, good shoes, I would put myself in the top 10%, top 5% of keep going. But it's all mental. If I'm walking along 18-year-olds and stuff, or it's me at 18, no, I'm done. I'm donezo. But it depends. What are the rules? Like... It all depends how I feel. It depends who I'm walking with, how I feel, what they are. If they're all a bunch of people I think are shitty, maybe I'll just do some Charlie Plummer shit in the wall. I don't know. But I don't know what I'd ask for. Depends what world I lived in. Do you believe Humanity. Do you believe humanity has a morbid curiosity that we come running when our fellow man is suffering, but not to help? Works of fiction like Hunger Games, The Long Walk, Snowpiercer seem to suggest this. I do think that people just want to see. They want to know. But I do think people will help for the most part, but only if they absolutely have to. A lot of times people don't want to get involved. Last week's post, I'm pretty sure Creepshow 2 is my first ever horror anthology, and I still love it to decades later, though I concede that Part 1 is a better movie. They don't make them like this anymore. That being said, I remain optimistic in regards to Laurie Brewster's In the Grip of Terror, the first Amicus film in 50 years. I can hardly believe we're already at the end of the Pete Walker horror box set. I know he quit for a reason, but I will still have liked more films from the hand of the master, but that's the way the cookie crumbles, huh? Too few pearls and far too much slop. Finally saw Witchboard 2025. It was okay, but has nothing to write home about. I was familiar with lead actors Madison Iseman, Tales of Halloween, Animal Comes Home, and Jamie Campbell Bower, Sweeney Todd, Stranger Things, but they have both been in better movies. As the director Chuck Russell, he most certainly directed better movies with superior special effects because the CGI in this one was dicey. No shit, man. Terrible CGI. Question, should anthology films always be based on existing short stories? No. The term always should never. See how that works? But always, I don't like that term. It shouldn't always be always. You know what I mean? Like, you can't always, just any time a sentence is always or never, it's probably wrong. But I don't think so. Do you prefer Trilogy of Terror 1 or 2? I mean, 1 has the great little, the kind of crazy war soldier at the end, but it's been so long since I've seen 2. I can't honestly answer that. What's your favorite Chuck Russell movie? The Blob from '88. Thanks for the amazingly entertaining hour. You always add some spice and color, not referring to the multicolored tank tops, which are fine to my week. Take care until next week, God willing. Thank you. Way Up Dude gives me the thumbs up and everything. Thank you. And we're going to hop into the update, guys. All right, here we go. First up is Gang Related with Jim Belushi and Tupac. Nice deluxe edition here. I don't think I've ever seen that one, but I'm willing to give it a spin, obviously. Next up, we have a Saturn's Core here. It looks like a Wave production. We got Bloody Creek. Yeah, it looks nice and cheap and sleazy. Probably not that sleazy. Does this have a second one on there, or is it only Bloody Creek? There we go. Gary Whitson, the director himself, on the back there, strangling somebody, getting his hands dirty. Then we have Vice Academy 1 through 6. My Sato set didn't come, but they explained why, so that won't be in here. I'm very excited for that set, by the way. But we have Vice Academy 1 through 6. I had the old set, but now it's a Vinegar Archive set here, so all 6 of them together. Next up, we got the Larry Fessenden Volume 2 box set. Scream Factory re-releases here. Monsters and Madness, the films of Larry Fessenden. I'm a subscriber, or otherwise, not that I hate these movies, I just probably wouldn't have double dipped on them. Wendigo and The Last Winter. But, yeah, they're nicer sets, though, for sure. And then we have the Black Panther of Shaolin. This is EGFA release here. Looks insane. See the 6 biggest, baddest, waist 150 motorcycle. I can't read it because the thing on there. And the Black 6 here, yeah. So, the Black 6 I've heard of. What do we got coming up next? We got the Strange Affair. What was this? VSL? This one I don't know much about. Caught my attention. I don't buy all their sub-label stuff, but then we got Bloodstained Italy. Very excited for this set here. Very cool. We got Death Falls Lightly, Obscene Desire, and The Bloodstained Law. 3 titles I've heard of, but I've never seen any of them. So that's very cool to check those off the list. And we got a fantastic movie here. I hope this is a 4K, because I think it is, yes. And this is The Resurrected by Dan O'Bannon. A great, fantastic Lovecraft adaptation with Chris Sarandon in it. But the first time I ever saw this movie, I was disappointed. But this one grew on me, man. It's a fantastic movie with fantastic effects. And last, I already had the old Blu-ray, but we're upgrading for extra commentaries on here as well. And this is The House of Long Shadows with Vincent Price, Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, John Carradine. That's right. And of course Sheila Keith, directed by Pete Walker. It's 1983. This is the last horror film that Pete Walker ever did. Maybe the last film he ever directed, I think. And yeah, this is the only film with all 4 of these people, these gentlemen in it. And yeah, this is going to be the first one I watch for 1983, guys. I am working on the essay. It's almost done. It's a lot of work. It's over 3 hours long. Way too long. I'm insane. I don't know if it's going to be as good as the other ones, but it's a very long and in-depth one. So there we go. But let's get back to the video. All right, guys. Thank you very much for watching. And as always, have a good one.